Crypto regulation versus control decentralization. Go figure. It still isn't resolved. Let's take a deeper look at what regulation actually does. Because every time crypto grows, power shows up asking the same question. Who controls it? Because we can't let you control it. That's right. You can't control your own money. The government doesn't like that. And that's any government. Hacking, lying, stealing, except for the ones that have been defeated. History books and lessons. Interesting. New to me. So regulation isn't about safety anymore. It's about control versus decentralization. Regulators love to say they're catching up. I'm always seeing that. Pretty much on every subject. It doesn't matter. They're catching up. It's too new for them. Well, perhaps they shouldn't be our regulators to begin with then. If you can't keep up with the current events, if you're still riding on a horse and buggy, perhaps you shouldn't be making the decisions in the world in which affects everyday life for people that are not in a horse and buggy. Nothing against horse and buggy, just that's not the world we live in. When regulators say they're catching up, that is a lie. Please understand this. Regulation doesn't catch up, it redirects. And the first thing regulation always does is pick the winners and the losers. Large incumbents can often afford compliance. Small builders can't. Decentralized protocols don't fit in regulatory boxes. So regulation doesn't eliminate risk, it centralizes it. Again, regulation doesn't eliminate risk, it centralizes it. Regulation doesn't remove power, it concentrates. Who do you think benefits most from crypto regulation? Users or institutions? Compliance and how ID control enters. Remember the short segment on MFA as a basis and premises for the arguments at hand. Crypto regulation rarely starts with wallet. It starts with exchanges. Then it'll wrap into KYC. No, that is not chicken. Then identity binding. Then transaction monitoring. And when you connect the dots, know your customer. Know everyone. Everyone. Why do you think they spend so much time on your digital twin? You have several. Financial compliance becomes behavioral tracking, and identity becomes permission-based. This is how decentralization gets softened, not banned. You don't outlaw it, you make it inconvenient. Compliance is how control enters systems that were built to resist it. Once identity is mandatory, exclusion becomes policy. Here is the part they don't say out loud. Regulatory ambiguity isn't a failure. It's a tool, and it's the tool they use against all of us. Ambiguous lines, ambiguous code. In fact, this brings me to a point. When you sign your contracts with Apple, Microsoft, or any other big tech vendor in order to use their software, if you take some time and read it, you'll discover it makes no sense. You can't understand. It is written that way on purpose. Ambiguity, it is a tool. And many of the clauses require that you read outside documents. They make references. So then you have to read those documents. And even then, if you read those, they still don't make sense. They're written in such a way to be ambiguous because, again, it's a tool. Rules discourage experimentation. Fear replaces innovation, and at that point, builders self-censor. Unclear rules always favor the people who already have lawyers. Ambiguity is the regulator's strongest weapon. Would you build something new if the rules could change tomorrow? Decentralization. The argument, I don't believe, is really about money. I believe the argument is truly about permission. I believe at the end of the day, it'll be permissions. No central kill switch. No single authority. And no universal blacklist. That's not a technical threat. That's a governance threat. Power ignores systems until they matter, and then it regulates them. Early crypto was ignored. Growth triggered attention, and attention triggered control, or at least the attempts for it. When systems grow big enough, power shows up with rules. The real question isn't whether crypto should be regulated. The question is who gets to decide what's acceptable. Because once that line is drawn, decentralization becomes conditional. Decentralization that requires approval isn't decentralization. Can decentralization survive identity mandates? Where's the line between safety and control? Crypto regulation isn't about stopping bad actors. It's about deciding who gets access. And decentralization doesn't fall overnight. It erodes quietly through compliance, identity, and permission. Regulation doesn't remove power, it concentrates it. Compliance is how control enters decentralization systems. Ambiguity is the regulator's strongest weapon. Decentralization that requires approval isn't decentralization. Why does big tech seem to want MFA and crypto? Why is it pushed? Crypto itself is hard to control, and identity by itself is hard to monetize. But when you combine crypto with MFA, proven identity, you get something entirely different. You don't get decentralization anymore. You get programmable access to money. Proven identity ends with pseudonymity, and crypto was built to be pseudonymous, not anonymous, meaning you don't need permission to participate. You can be anyone, whoever you wish to be, and use crypto. When you require government-backed ID, mandatory MFA, and device binding, then every transaction stops being a transaction and it becomes a logged event tied to a real person. That's you. Once identity is mandatory, money stops being neutral. You see, money doesn't care who holds it or where it's going under the current system. So MFA may sound harmless. It's just for security, it's for safety. But in our financial system, MFA becomes an enforcement lever. MFA can be required to transact. MFA can be revoked at any time. Failures can lock your fund. Events can be flagged automatically. When access to your money requires continuous authentication, control no longer happens at the bank, it happens at the identity layer. If access can be turned off, ownership becomes conditional. Big tech doesn't want crypto because it's decentralized. Once identity is attached, every transaction will be tied to a profile. No more pseudonymous behavior. Perfect data correlation. Governments define identity rules and platforms enforce them. Liability always shifts downward. Verified users get access, but unverified users will get friction. Trust will become a paid feature. Identity becomes the product, and access becomes the subscription. Big tech doesn't monetize crypto, they monetize identity attached to crypto. The danger isn't that crypto disappears, the danger is that it survives, but only with people who qualify. At that point, wallets will still exist, blockchains still run, but participation will become filtered and exclusion will be automated. And when you call because there's a problem, you will talk to an automated system in which you will hang up after 8 minutes because you're tired of waiting. That's not decentralization. That's permission finance with better branding.
I'm sure they'll have a commercial with a puppy.
Decentralized tech with centralized identity becomes centralized power. We've already seen this pattern in social media, where social media profits off of scams. Identity verification was supposed to stop the abuse, but what it actually has done is make speech conditional. Now that same logic will be applied to money. And when money, identity, and access are merged, opting stops. Choice stops. The future isn't banned, it's gated.
I'm sure they'll have a commercial with a puppy.
Perfect data correlation.